Welcome to Wayward Writers. We are so glad that you have joined us, and we really appreciate your inspiring reaction to our episode 1. That was wonderful, and for those of you who have connected with us on social media, we're very grateful. So today we are going to talk all about the traditional publishing path, and the three of us have all either published or I'm an agent, so I've sold to the traditional market, and we are going to do our very best not to be biased toward the traditional publishing path, but there are reasons that each of us have chosen to pursue that path, and so we just want to put it out for you all that we acknowledge that we are possibly biased in this way. So one thing that I really wanted to touch on was that when you are choosing what path you want to go down, or if you've already chosen a path, then you need to know why you chose that path, because there are a lot of things that you're going to get with traditional publishing that you can only get with traditional publishing. And so if those are your whys and that's the main reason that you're doing it, you want to make sure and think about those things very carefully. So we have a trailhead class that you'll get if you sign up for our newsletter. And that trailhead class, we talk a lot about the different paths and why you can choose those paths, and we have a little quiz. You can head on over to our website and get on the newsletter if you would like to check that out further. Okay, so today, traditional publishing. I have a quote that I keep by Virginia Woolf, and she said, "Writing is like sex. First you do it for love, then you do it for your friends, and then you do it for money." Tiffany, what do you think about this quote?
Absolutely. Isn't writing totally sexy? I actually really love this quote because it does talk about writing. You start out doing it for yourself, and then you're sharing it with your friends and family and the people who love you. And then when you get brave, you got to figure out, I'm going to do it for money. And that's where we come to making those choices as to how you're going to publish and what path you're going to take. Because we like to have our books in the bookshelves and in the bookstore, on the bookshelves in the library, and you have that dream of being at the conference and being the speaker. But besides it being sexy, there are some other reasons that we might want to be traditionally published. Right, Nikki?
Yeah, of course. So this quote is interesting because I think it's also fluid, right? Like sometimes you're really wanting to strive to get that advance or maybe that royalty or whatever it is. And then sometimes it'll go back and you fall in love with the craft again and
Yeah.
you're not even really thinking about the money. And so I think that
Oh, I'm
goes
always
with
thinking about the money.
that's fair. That's totally fair. But I think sometimes it's not just that. Sometimes it's not a job all the time
Yeah.
because there's this
Yeah.
passion and things like that. And, for me, at least at this point in my career, I've only traditionally published, and on the horizon, that's what I'm going to do. That could change. And that's what I think the beauty of publishing and this community that we have and we're building is that you never know. There's different
Well,
seasons, there's different
and I
projects that have different goals, and you
yeah.
become a different writer, right?
And I think that that's the wonderful thing is that there are different paths and you are free to move amongst the paths or take different paths at different times. But like we're saying, there are some advantages and disadvantages to traditionally publishing that you are currently not able to get in any other place, like being listed on the New York Times bestsellers list. You can only do that if you're traditionally published. Many awards only go to traditionally published. There are different awards for self-published, but
Absolutely. So another thing about writing and traditionally published, there's this quote by Donald Winnicott, and it says, "Artists are people driven by the tension between the desire to communicate and the desire to hide." And if you stop and think about that quote for a minute, it's interesting because most creators and writers are introverts. I am not. If you have not guessed that yet by episode 2, I am definitely an extrovert, but that doesn't mean, right, that extroverts don't want to still hide. And we're probably too expressive about hiding and letting people know that we're hiding instead of just walking away or whatever. But if you want your work out in the world, you have to come out of hiding and you have to be vulnerable.
And I think people used to think you could hide better with traditional publishing because it's like in the movies and all the Hallmark channels say that you could send your story in and it's going to go to the editor and to get published and they're going to advertise it for you and all those things, like, so you can just be the writer in your little lair hiding. And that's not, probably never really was the truth and is definitely not the truth now. Even though I would really love to just stay inside my cave and write all the time, but we can't.
Yeah.
And
And
and that
thankfully, we have people that write in these communities that we can connect and they can encourage us to come out of hiding. I know we've all probably, I know that the three of us have, where we lovingly tell a critique partner, if you don't query this, if you don't send it out or apply for this award or this scholarship or grant, I will do it for you because I have your latest version
yes, I do.
and it is ready. So,
Yeah.
don't you guys think, Heather, like just communicating and connecting with other people is what makes this publishing world go around, right?
Absolutely. I think that when we write, we are expressing, like, even if we don't realize it, we are expressing the very innermost desires of our hearts, really. And I think that even when you're reading something that maybe has a simpler plot or things like that, like even something as simple as a picture book that speaks to a child, you're communicating and you're connecting on a very basic level. And we can reach across time, we can reach across space, we can feel what it was like to be in the past, we can feel what it might be like to be in the future. I just think that this is a way for us to reach out, to the universe and put ourselves out and see what we can connect with and what comes back to us. And I think that's the foundational part of writing. So, for anyone who maybe doesn't quite know what a traditional publisher is or what it means to be traditionally published, just a really quick rundown here. Traditional publishers often give an advance on royalties, which means they give you your money early so that you, as a writer, can survive while you're waiting for your book to be published, because it does take a while. And the publisher retains the rights to the project, the right to print it, and then they also will include certain types of other rights, licenses for the work. They might try and retain foreign rights or language rights, audio, film, merchandising, any of those subsidiary rights. And so that the publisher actually tries to keep as many rights as they can. But then they also go and try and sell them. And they're often very connected, especially if it's a big five publisher like Penguin Random House or HarperCollins. They already have, HarperCollins UK, HarperCollins Germany, which is not the name of it, but you get my point. And so there's this much wider reach. And with traditional publishing, they also retain most of the control on the production and the distribution of the manuscript, but then they also pay for that, and they have channels to do it, and they have connections with schools and libraries and major tailors and wholesalers. And so mostly traditional publishing is about the money, when the money comes in, and the control, the rights of things. So now that we know what it is, let's talk about what type of expectations you maybe should have if you decide to go the traditional publishing route. Nikki, can you tell us a little bit about expectations?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we're exploring these paths, because we'll explore self-publishing and hybrid and small house publishing and things like that over the next few weeks, I know I have learned so much. Not that I thought I knew a lot about every different path, because I surely didn't. It's like a grain in the sand on a huge beach. But um, there's some things that I thought were one way, and they're not, or they're not anymore. Maybe you have heard something about traditionally publishing that has changed, or maybe you're publishing in a different path and you're curious. So we're just going to lay out just some expectations, that we can all please let us know too what you've come to expect in traditionally publishing in the comments and on social media. But I would say number one is the virtue of patience. Now I sound like a mother. Patience is a virtue. Any path, there's patience. Traditionally published is probably the one that I would say requires the most patience, because of that control of you waiting on someone else to accept it or want a revision, and then you decide if you want that revision. So it's kind of like a hurry up and wait, like traveling at the airport. You have to get there quickly so you don't miss it, and then you wait as it's delayed. It takes time at every step of the process. I am probably the least patient person I know. The other advantages of traditionally published make it worth it for me. And when I'm about ready to lose my mind, I have Stephanie and Heather and other critique partners and friends to like talk me down, that remind me of my goals that I have previously told them. They always support what I want to do with my writing. But I think that's why it takes a community like Wayward Writers and other to help each other and support each other. And that's how we continue. It's vital to our preservation and our success. It's a marathon, not a race. And so I think that's a huge part, is the patience. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's about the writing, no matter what. Um, However, connections and networking, just like any business, a lot of times it has nothing to do with our writing. I think anyone you talk to, they will have had rejections where it's like, oh my gosh, the writing was wonderful, but the market, but the money we don't have. Having connections in communities like this, I know most of the opportunities that I've been presented with was because I knew someone that maybe knew someone who had an email or something like that. So making connections for critique partners, for speaking engagements, agents, editors, all those things are huge. And then there's this other thing about timing and luck. Or sometimes it feels like all the stars have to be aligned for something to work. Now, it's not all luck, right? You have to have the writing, you have to have the craft, you have to have the chops to put yourself out there. But most of them are completely uncontrollables. So on the bright side, we focus on what are the controllables, so we don't drive ourselves insane. I can control how often I write, and I put my butt in the seat. You have to just not give up, because things that you might have started years ago can come around and turn into something, which is an amazing experience. And every project you do is not a waste. It will help you, if nothing else, which is the best part, become a better writer. And sometimes you have to write the 5 books before the sixth one is the one where you've gone to a next level without even noticing it. And that's why we're here. We're here to help each other, to keep going, to know that there's always going to be opportunities out there. It's just a matter of timing, and if we seek them out, kind of like that come out of our hiding. They don't just usually land in our lap. We have to seek them out. Stephanie, what do you think, if we were to sum it up, what are some of the advantages of traditionally publishing?
I'm going to know that my books that are traditionally published are automatically going to be in my little bookstore. I'm not going to have to take them there and put them in. They're going to be available for people. I'm going to be able to get reviews on them, which helps with the sales. There's is a among writers themselves, there's often the feeling of prestige because, as you were talking about, no matter what, whether you get 20 books published or just a few published traditionally, you had to meet certain criteria to be able to do that. You had to write well enough to be able to get the attention of an agent. Your agent had to be able to say, yes, I can try and sell this. So you're writing at a certain level to be able to be in the traditional market. Not saying that you can't write at that level and be fantastic self-publishing too, because you can, but there is recognition, and I think that helps a lot on those days when you get rejected, and there are many of those. It's okay, I've already made it. My writing has been recognized, and it makes me personally more confident in my abilities because it's been recognized as good enough to be traditionally published. Most traditional publishers will help with marketing and definitely getting your books out there. So I'm not worried. My book's going to be available anywhere at any library to purchase in catalogs, and sometimes they will help depending on your publisher, and just they'll make posters for you, help you get into conferences, and so those things are wonderful. We do have you have publicity house, and the other huge advantage to me is the editorial help. When I've got a project, it's going to go to Heather, and Heather's going to take a good look at it, my agent, and she's going to tell me if this is after it's been through critique groups, but it's going to go to Heather, and Heather's going to go, you need to work on this. So I'm going to take it back, and when it leaves her hands, it's going to be as good as we can make it. And then when it gets to an editor, I will work with an editor to make it even better. And that's some of the wonderful alchemy that I love about traditional publishing, because you can work with an editor who combines their vision for it and your vision, and you get a product that's better than you even envisioned. And I love that aspect. I love that collaboration that you have with an editor, with your agent, and getting that input. Don't feel that it's impinging on my writing, because I enjoy that. And so to me, that's a huge advantage, to be able to have other eyes and other viewpoints in putting that all together. For me, I think it always makes a better product in the end. It's a better book, a better story, and I love that collaborative effort. So
And Stephanie, don't you think
that's a big
even if it
advantage.
doesn't publish, like even if it doesn't sell, that experience that you paid not a penny for. There's been like R&Rs that you walk away and the deal doesn't happen, but
Oh,
you
I know,
feel like
and it
you've had
hurts.
like oh, it hurts super bad. Yep, still hurting. But
It still hurts, but yes, the
it's like you
experience,
had
it's like having a college
intention.
course that I
Yes.
didn't have to pay for.
And
Yeah.
someone else that didn't know you except your words, this is a speaking of the editor, like that they just pull, like by just asking questions, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
it doesn't impinge your right. Asking questions, they're just pulling out all these things that were in you that you maybe didn't even know
Yeah.
were there. Like you go back and read it later and you're like, oh, I wrote that? Oh, hey, okay. Maybe I
Well,
was
I
having
also
kind of a
think
good
it
day that
helps you.
day.
I think a good editor really helps you in that, what you're talking about, leveling up. It's really hard to get there by yourself. And I understand you can hire a great editor, and that's fantastic too. But I don't have to pay for the editor, they pay me. That's a thing.
I also would love to add that in the traditional publishing path, I think what makes it unique, this collaborative experience, is that your agent takes on your book because they love it. Your agent takes on your book because they're passionate about it. And so you already have a super fan who's going to help you make that book better. And then your editor takes on your manuscript because they love it. They're passionate about it. So you have this, yes, you can go somewhere and you can pay an editor to make your work better. But are they going to be as invested? Are they going to be passionate about your work? Are they also investing their own time and their entire career.
Yeah.
No, that other editor is not nearly as invested. They're invested for as much money as you're going to pay them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm invested for the lifetime of a book as an agent. That editor and that publisher is invested in you and your book for the lifetime of the book. And they're going to try and make that lifetime last as long as possible. And you can have longevity, of course, in self-publishing as well, because you're in control of that. But I think that the main difference I see with this collaborative process is that you have a whole team of people behind you that are invested. I've seen this happen over and over. Picture book authors who partner with an illustrator, and that illustrator adds just layers of creativity and meaning and their own experience into something that can become more than you ever could have made on your own. And maybe that's not what you want, and that's fine, but I think that's the beauty of this process for the traditionally published author.
I totally, and that's the part that there are other advantages, but to me, that collaborative aspect and the teamwork, putting it all together, I love that. And I don't know that I can get that as the way that I want it. So that's why. That's my why, part of my why for why I love to work with traditionally published, even though there are a few disadvantages.
Probably more
Nikki,
than you. Let's be honest.
any disadvantages that you have noticed in your career?
Yeah, and I'm going to try not to elaborate and get too in the weeds because they'll need to be tissues. No. It's always good to have a good split eating, wine drinking, cry for good and bad stuff, right? You got to celebrate all the wins. But let's talk about some of the disadvantages. Just like the expectation, you have to be patient because it's a big time commitment from
Yes, it is.
the time you start drafting your first draft to it picking it up on a bookshelf, and it can be years. Even once your manuscript is polished, it's query an agent or an editor or something like that, it can still take years. Um, and up to 5 years, depending on the schedule of the house and if it's a picture book when it's coming out, or just all illustrators involved or cover artists, all of those things. So it's a huge time commitment. It is a marathon. It is not a race, and there is no guarantee of sale because someone else is not only validate your writing, but also validate that there is money to spend and that it's worth spending, not going to overshadow another project that they've already bought. So those are a lot of things, right? They all have to align. So that's another disadvantage. Loss of ownership, right? You're giving up those rights, which that could be a whole podcast on alone. Also, the control. Sometimes we get blessed that we get more insight maybe on a cover or a picture that's being used, which is a beautiful thing when that happens. But that's not always the case. A lot of times it's this is the title and this is what we're doing because it's a business.
Your agent can negotiate for consultation, but it is extremely rare unless you are just a huge big name author and you get to make your own contract up. But that almost never happens. And so a lot of you can get what's called consultation, which means you get to put your 2 cents in, but then the real decision actually happens by the editor and the sales team and the team behind you. And so you don't have a lot of control. You can influence, but and you can argue your case and you can say, well, this is why, and I think this is how it's going to increase marketing. And I would absolutely suggest that you advocate for yourself in a way that you are stating things like, this is why I think this is going to be better. You might influence them and you might be able to open their eyes to a new possibility. So make sure that you're communicating with your editor. Make sure you're communicating with your publicists and all of those people.
That is this is an advantage and a disadvantage is the communication. The lines of communication are really important to be able to get back to those editors and get back to your agent and all of that.
And I'll be honest, I have seen editors who don't communicate. And it's very frustrating, especially when, you are doing your best and then the editor doesn't get back to you at all. That is something that can happen. I don't want to scare people off from traditional publishing because I think that it's wonderful and there's so many wonderful aspects to it. But the reality is that your experience can depend solely on your editor and your imprint and your publisher. And just about every experience that can be had out there has been had, I think.
Don't say that, because then we'll have something new.
We could all have a coffee talk about it, right? This entire
Yeah.
community have, I'm sure, so many stories. And that's what the retreats are for. One of the things we can chat about all of our experiences and help each other and stuff like that.
Okay.
And another disadvantage to, like, as far as the control, is some of the marketing control. Obviously, you can promote yourself. No one is going to promote your book better than yourself, no matter what path you take. But the marketing's an advantage and disadvantage. You have people helping you market, but it's still a responsibility if you want it to be successful.
The reality is that you will always be the best promoter of your work. Yes. However, you as a single person do not have the reach that a large publishing house will have. They will have connections. They will have lists of influencers who they can afford to pay to promote your work. They have access to thousands of librarians, right? They can send boxes of books to thousands of librarians. They can send ARCs out for you, thousands of ARCs, or sometimes hundreds of ARCs. Like, it just depends on your book and how much they're promoting it. But that is a reach that you probably will never have as a self-published author. And that's just the power of a corporation. When you have a corporation behind you, that's an advantage that you can have, and it does impact your sales. Of course, another disadvantage I would just like to also throw in is that if you are a self-published author, you can set the price point of your book. You will get a huge amount of royalties for your book.
Mm-hmm.
With traditional publishing, you're going to get, because they're spending all this money on you and they're giving you an advance, you're going to get lower royalties. So, the longevity of the book, you may decide that if money is your deciding factor, the reality is that publishing is a gamble.
It is.
Because you have no idea how well your book can sell if it hits the New York Times, or if, you organically find an audience. There's all of these things that are a total gamble.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's a reality about this business, which is a disadvantage usually because you're gambling, but sometimes it's just really worth it because you love what you're doing. I'm going to talk about the big disadvantage to traditional publishing, and that is rejection, because it's very sad. That is a fact. If you are going to be traditionally published, you need to gird your loins because you're going out on the battlefield every time. And that's what it's going to feel like too. Because you have this project that you love. You've got an agent who's behind you and likes the project too. And you're like, oh my gosh, yes, we've got it made. And you still get rejections. So there's a lot of rejections. There's rejection in trying to get an agent. There's rejection along the way in your agent submitting. There are reviews. Don't read your reviews all the time. Let me just, because the person who complains about
Don't
what
respond.
the price was for your book, that I didn't set the price for it, all those things. So there is a lot of rejection. I think that, again, that's why we need the community around us, because I've got to go like, Nikki, it was really bad. But then you can celebrate when it's good too. So I do think that going through the rejection and understanding, I've been in the business a long time. I have more rejections than I would ever even care to. I just don't even think about them anymore. It's like, yeah, one more. It makes those acceptances so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And so powerful. Even if you have an agent, even if you've sold lots of books, there's still rejection. And you have to be prepared for it and learn how to deal with it. like I said, lay in your supply of chocolate, get the big juggo of wine, get a lot of coffee, whatever it takes. That's what you got to do, because it is just a part of it. And we are all rejected, even agents, right, Heather?
And
Agents get
editors,
rejected.
Absolutely.
It's just,
I think agents get the most rejection of anybody because I get all the rejections for all of
oh
my
yeah,
clients,
I hadn't thought of that.
and
That's very sad.
I
I'm going to
get
send you more
rejections
chocolate.
for my own writing. Yeah, and then I get rejections from authors who decide to go with a different agent, which is always sad for me. I think the thing about all these advantages and disadvantages, I feel like there might be less number of advantages, it feels like, with traditional publishing, as we've been talking about this, but the advantages can be massive.
Yeah.
Right, like you can hit the New York Times, you can sell your foreign rights in traditional publishing, you can sell film rights in traditional publishing, and there are definitely barriers in self-publishing for a lot of these things. And I think that is what traditional publishing offers, is that you can shoot for the stars and you just might get there. Whereas with self-publishing, you are your team, and it's a harder road perhaps because you are only one person and you are your marketer and you are your, but that's, to be fair, I know self-published authors who are making $300,000 a year.
Yep.
And they are perfectly happy with that,
Yeah.
and I think that's totally fine.
and
And if
if-
they don't care about
it's amazing.
the opportunity of getting New York Times, and they don't care about that, and they're happy with their $300,000 a year,
we
great.
could all be happy with $300,000
I would be
a
happy
year.
with that.
I know. But I do think, there's lots of choices, and that's what's exciting, because for the person who wants to be their own team and to just really do it on their own, that option's available too.
We can change our mind, which I feels like so freeing. So, while you take that trailhead quiz, and like, some of us are like, well, I was kind of two of them, or it told me this, but like in my heart, I really want to be this path. Like, you get to choose. And if you start going down it and you're like, nope, this isn't for me, you can change. And, that's why this community is about all of the different ways to publish. So we can learn
And you can do
together.
more than one path too.
Exactly.
I think we should think more about publishing in terms of our own capabilities and our own desires.
Yep.
I feel as self-published authors are paying for amazing editors, paying sometimes thousands and thousands of dollars to get top-notch editors, and they're putting out really good stuff with beautiful covers, quality books.
But that's exciting. I think that's why now in publishing is an exciting time. I think things are changing, and I think that we'll be able to address some of those changes and things that are going on in the industry as a whole, and how authors can take advantage of those changes. And I think it's exciting.
Yes. And our readers, they're looking for a good book that they can fall into. And that comes from all types of writers and all type publishing. And as long as we all strive to keep that goal, I mean, that's the win, right? Is someone picking up your book and finishing it and recommending it to someone. Those things are amazing.
So how do we move forward when the opinions of editors keep us from getting published, or the opinions of agents keep us from getting published, or sometimes our own doubts or things like that keep us from getting published? And I have this quote that I really, really love by Kafka, and he said, "Don't bend. Don't water it down. Don't try to make it logical. Don't edit your own soul according to the fashion. Rather, follow your most intense obsessions mercilessly." And I love this quote because it's exactly what I want our podcast to be about. How are we going to pursue our passions when other people control our careers almost? Yeah. We have this project that we love and it won't work in the traditional market, or we have passions that we're writing about that need an outlet. And so in our future episodes, we are going to talk more about this. We're going to talk about different publishing paths. We're going to talk about how to deal with it when our creative starts to fade or struggle because we are just getting so many rejections. Like, how do we keep our mental health in a good place? How do we fight this fight, right? How do we keep going when things are so much out of our control?
Absolutely.
And I think the key is focusing on what we can control, and one of those things is what we write and why we write.